What's up, family, and welcome to Bible Study with an Ex-Pastor, where we learn the Bible and laugh at the bullshit. And as sacrosanct as that may seem, we don't mean that in a way of sacrilegious theology, but more so in the way of humanistic therapy. We prioritize people over prophecy, and this space exists for people to confront their fears and comfort their questions. Our unique perspective is that these are not religious texts in the modern sense. They reflect a time when there was no delineation between God and government. In that manner, we treat them as political superstition that shaped hierarchy and obedience, and we aim to empower people by recognizing how these systems operated and how our relationships with them have impacted the world. Now, if this is your first time visiting this space, my name is Darante, LaMar, and I am committed to empowering individuals and communities through critical thinking, humanistic values, and progressive people-centric solutions. Speaking of which, we launched our Bridge City Global Community Experiment a year ago this Sunday, and to celebrate, we're reclaiming the Easter season as Rising Season. Over this past year, our little community has grown from 52 to, as it stands now, nearly 18,000 subscribers from all across the globe. It is absolutely amazing. Hop into this week's Sunday session to learn more about what that means and what we're planning. Now, I'm so glad to have you here for our secular Bible study, and I will warn you in advance that these sessions are always raw, but always relevant. Tonight, we're diving into the book of Numbers after closing out Leviticus last week, and as I told you then, I'm experimenting with new ways that we can add additional value in these sessions, and I think tonight I found a way to squeeze some really valuable insights out of a really boring book. So before we jump in, make sure you subscribe to the channel and our email list so that you're getting all the updates and news about what's happening in this growing global community. Let's go ahead and jump into Bible study. Say that again. I hope you all have had a wonderful day. I hope everything is going well for you. I have had a fantastic day. I've been working from the time I got up until now. And so as of now, I'm literally just getting a break, but it's been a beautiful day. I did something different. Today. Started it this week with the last video. We did about things Christians say. We actually created a content guide. Man, did we get a super chat already? I love that. Are we allowed rising agents? I thought we all had to eat unleavened bread this season. Beautiful. Thank you, Muttley, for that £5 super chat. Oh, I love that. Yes, let's get all the rising agents you want. We've produced a content guide that goes along with our most recent video, and it's now available on Windows Shop. And I told y'all last week that I wanted to start approaching these Bible studies a little differently, just to try to pull as much value out of these as we can. And so I decided to also create a content guide for tonight. Now, I don't know if I'm going to be doing this for all of our Bible studies, but I definitely thought tonight would be a good place to start because I put so much information in tonight's guide. And so that guide is available right now on Windows Shop. That link is in our description. If you are a patron, hold off. If you're a patron, we're going to make that document available to you free, as well as the one we released yesterday. If you're not a patron and not interested in being a patron, then you just go ahead and go to Windows Shop and get it. The guide, it's in depth, and you'll see from the conversations tonight. So we're starting in the book of Numbers tonight. We finally made it out of Leviticus. Your boy is happy. Damn, it took us forever. Oh my goodness, I can see clearly now the rain is gone. This is that type of feeling. So I'm excited. And actually, I spent quite a bit of my time today after the Daily Atheist Morning Show and after doing work stuff. I spent quite a bit of my time today actually jumping in and kind of unpacking what are some things that we can pull out of the book of Numbers. And I was actually pleasantly surprised. So we're going to do this a little different tonight. Instead of me reading verse by verse, we're going to break this thing down and we're going to do our best to get through 10 chapters. How does that sound for you? 10 chapters. And by the way, while we're getting into this, let us know where you're watching from, whether you're watching now or later in the chat or in the comments. Let us know where you're watching from, and also sign up for our email list so that way you stay updated with everything that's coming. Oh, yes, this is beautiful. All right, so The book of Numbers open up, 10 of them mugs. The book of Numbers opens not with theology, but with logistics. It's who counts, who leads, who labors, and who is closest to the seat of power. These chapters aren't about belief, they're about institutional design and ritualized control, a structure that dressed itself in the language of the cosmos. Now, understanding these texts as early documents of political superstition and not religion as we practice it today allows us to see how ritual and order were tools of obedience, not necessarily enlightenment. And so, but in exposing these mechanisms, we gain clarity on how systems of control work and how we can build something better. Now, that's exciting to me. Right, we couldn't get through 2 the other week. This is ambitious. I am an ambitious motherfucker. I don't know if y'all knew that about me. Camden, New Jersey, listening from Berea, is that Kentucky? Yes, look at there. I love it. Welcome in. All right, so we're going to open up in Numbers chapter 1. And Numbers chapter 1 is a census where they are literally counting bodies in order to build an army. For those of you who get the guide, you will see I've kind of broken it up in 4 sections, verses 1 through 4. And I guess I will read verse 1, just so we felt like we read the Bible. But it says, "Now the Lord spoke to Moses in the wilderness of Sinai in the tent of meeting on the first day of the second month in the second year after they had come out of the land of Egypt, saying," verse 2, "Take a census of all the congregation of the sons of Israel by their families, by their fathers' households, according to the number of names, every male head by head." All right, so those are the first 2 verses. Maybe we'll get some more. Torrance, California is in the house. Come on now. I'm loving that. Houston, Texas is in the house. Come on. Vancouver Island, Canada. Yes, Canada is in the building. I love it. This is beautiful. So verses 1 through 4 are kind of talking about Yahweh's command for the census of all able-bodied men, typically or specifically for those who are 20 and over. Verses 5 through 16, the leaders of each tribe are named. And that's one of the reasons why we're not going to read through this verse by verse tonight, because let's just be real. Ain't nobody got time for that. Just be reading names for no damn reason. We're not going to do that around here. But now verses 5 through 16, the leaders of each name or leaders of each tribe are named. Verses 17 through 46, which makes up the bulk of the chapter, this is where the census is carried out and where there are 603,550 men who are counted. And then verses 47 through 54, the Levites are excluded and they are assigned tabernacle duties. Now, I want to highlight some stuff. Oh yeah, we're going Spark Notes. See, that's how we get it. That's how we get it. I'm going to give you some key themes and some commentary, and then I'm going to highlight some other stuff that's in this guide that is probably going to, oh my goodness. I'm just going to tell you, this is about to be good conversation. Forgive me for getting excited a little early, but this is about to be good. And since my notes are on this side, I think I can look at this screen. I'll look at this camera. But okay, so key themes, some things that I want to point out here as we kind of build our conversation tonight, and I hope y'all are ready for this. This is a military census, not a spiritual one. This is a military census, not a spiritual one. It defines the structure of a fighting force, not a structure of faith. Notice in this that only men are counted and only those considered physically capable, right? So one of the things that we did see when we were reading through the book of Leviticus is that God, quote unquote, had really strict rules about who could serve in the priesthood. So if you had a limp, if you had crushed balls, we found out all these different types of weird rules. Weird hair or something growing out of a weird place. You couldn't be a priest if you had bad vision. You couldn't speak well, speech impediment. Basically, God, if you will, had this type, archetypal norm that you had to confine to for the priesthood. And I guess if we wanted to be reasonable with their superstition, we could maybe understand, well, this is a perfect God, and so only the perfect ones could go there. And the only reason I say that is because, interestingly enough, that's exactly what we do with the animals. Like with the animals, when they got to get a perfect goat to sacrifice, nobody says boo, which really shows you that we are really human exceptionalists out here. But so we'll stretch it and we'll allow oftentimes those rules to exist. But in this case, what we see in Exodus is now these rules, not only do they apply to the priesthood, but they also apply to this census that's being taken. And then, of course, so again, only the men are counted, and only those who are physically capable by what's being defined in the book of Numbers. And then everybody else is pretty much considered invisible. And then the other thing that we see here, and this is the main thing that we see in the final chapters or the final verses of chapter 1, is that the Levites are set apart. Now, this is not because they're better, but because they are politically embedded in ritual work that supports the system structure. So now what I want to do, this is just chapter 1, but chapter 1 does give us some questions. So the first question that I want to kind of give, that I want to kind of highlight, and if you get the guide, oh my goodness. Now again, if you're a patron, you're going to get this guide for free. If you're not, now listen, please, if you can't afford the guide, don't trip, man. I'm going to give out so much of this information tonight, so it's not that big of a deal. The guide is for those who could, number one, can afford it, and number two, like to learn that way. And again, I have there's over 12 tabs in here, and each of these tabs has at least very minimum 5 to 7 pages of information at minimum. So this is a weighty thing, but we're going to go through it. So okay, let me jump into this. First question that I had when coming through this, actually, dang it. Yeah, we'll do this. First question I had, because I had 2 questions. First 2 questions. You can get the guide on windowshop.us. The link is in the description. Link is in the description. No, you're good. Trust me. I be talking sometimes and don't be paying attention. Be like, dang, whatever you just said, it was good. You got to go back. All right. So I had 2 questions when I first reread through Numbers chapter 1. And my 2 questions were, number 1, why would God need a census? You know? And number 2, is this Israel's first census? You know, number 1, why would God need a census? You know, and number 2, is this Israel's first census? You know, so let me see here. Give me just a moment. Got him. Yoink. All right. Everyone, be forewarned, if you come into my chat and you are not engaging in the conversation we're having, I will boot you out without warning, without question, and then go right back to programming. And it won't be a short boot. You'll be booted for 24 hours. You can come back the next day and try again. All right, so here we go. Oh, man. Oh, man. All right, so an omniscient deity doesn't need a head count. That's the first thing that comes to me. And an omniscient deity doesn't need a head count. If Yahweh were convinced, if Yahweh were conceived by these people as truly all-knowing, then a command to count the people manually, tribe by tribe, man by man, would be absolutely unnecessary. And he literally says here, and we read it in verse 2, to take a census of the whole Israelite community by their clans and families, listing everyone name by name, one by one. Now, what this tells us is that Yahweh appears to require information to be gathered, organized, and presented to him like a king or a warlord, not a cosmic mind, not a cosmic deity, not somebody who sits high and looks low, not somebody who, you know, who's the creator of all the earth. The earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof. This God does not seem to have evolved into that aspect of a being. This God needs to know who the people he just saved is. Now that I've delivered y'all, who the hell is y'all? Who are y'all people? Now that I've split the Red Sea and brought y'all out and killed quite a bit of y'all, I would like to know y'all names. Let's talk now. Like that seems a little bit like putting the cart before the horse. You've liberated them. You've killed a few of them. You've done all types of just things. You've given them laws on how to unalive each other and all that great stuff. And now you get to the point of you're like, I want to know your name. Now you out there singing like Tevin Campbell, can we talk, you know, for a minute? You know, I just want to know your name. So God does this apparently, according to scripture, God does this census or requires the leaders of Israel to do this census, which again, this demonstrates to us, for us reading hindsight being full 2020, then that means this God is not an omniscient God. This God is not a God who has numbered all the hairs on your head. This God is not a God who before you were in your mother's womb knew you. That's not who this God is. This God, again, reads more like a king or a warlord than some type of cosmic deity. You know what I'm saying? It seemed like God was blacked out drunk when he created us. It doesn't quite make sense. All right, and then also the thing that we see here is that knowledge is mediated through human process. So Moses doesn't receive a download of all Israelite names and numbers. He has to assign tribal leaders to go through a process and report back. So he can't even go into his prayer closet and spend some time with the Lord, and the Lord just says, yeah, that's Josiah, that's Jeremiah, that's Zephaniah, that's James. I don't know why James, I had already started with the J's, so you just had to keep going. James is apparently the black sheep at that moment. But there is no prayer, there is no fasting, there is nothing that they do requires a God for it to be done. You know what I'm saying? Like this is, which while there are stories of miracles in the Bible, there are stories that are absolutely supernatural. I am working on a hypothesis that much of some of this superstition is stuff that comes from our own superstition and isn't necessarily in the text as we read it. And I'll walk through that a little later, but we kind of see that here. God says, hey, I need a census. I need to know everybody's name. Moses doesn't do anything supernatural. He doesn't go get all of the elders and say, hey, let us hold hands. And like, damn it, now rabbit trail, give me a moment, neurospicy moment. It reminds me of a plot arc in the show, The 100. The commander would have that Jesus unit that I couldn't resist it. But that's the chat. For those of you who are watching later, that's the chat, okay? I got to interact with my chat. I don't know what y'all want. But in the episode of The 100, or in the story arc, the people who was the commander, when they would become the commander, they'd have to recite the lineage of all of the commanders that came before them, and the lineage of the clans, Now, it turns out there was an AI in the back of their heads. That's what they were taking on when they became the commander. But I'm like, now that's just humans and technology. No ghosts, no gobbledygook, no nothing else. That's just good old human ingenuity. And they can name everybody. They don't need to go out and do administrative, bureaucratic work. But what we see here is a bureaucratic necessity, not something of divine intervention. There is no divine capacity demonstrated here, nor even necessary. Now, you will see this in this guide as well. One of the things that I highlight, which is a part of that hypothesis, that many times when we think of God, or when we see God speaking in the Old Testament, especially in books like Numbers and Deuteronomy, that we can safely replace that idea of a religious God with a national God, or even a national symbol, or even a national term such as executive power. And so then instead of reading, and then God spoke, and then executive powers spoke, So there's all different types of things, but you'll kind of see that. But either way, what we see here is a very human process, requiring bureaucracy, and everybody has to go. Moses calls all the leaders, and they go through a process, and they go talk to everybody, and then they come and report back. And we see that by the time we get to verse 16 in the text, which says, these were the men appointed from the community, the leaders of their ancestral tribes. And it just amazes me. It's like, whose names do you know? Like at that moment, like I get it, we're going to do a census. God don't know everybody's name. But I'd be really curious, just exactly how many names don't you know? You know what I'm saying? Like, who does God know? You know what I'm saying? Who does God not know? And is there a reason? Is it like a 60-40 thing, an 80-20, a 90-10? And which way does that 90-10 split? You know, God only knows 10% of the people, which, I mean, if you look at the world today and if you judge the world by prosperity, it would seem like God is only related to 1% of the population. Which, you know, to think about that, and I did not mean to hit this particular rabbit hole, but when you think about that, it is absolutely ludicrous to believe in a loving God with such disparity, you know. And I can speak from this disparity from somewhat of a position of comfort, because I live in something that would be described as a first world country. So these are first world issues, while we have many countries on this planet who would likely die to have my type of debt or my type of slavery. And that's the context that we live in. And to live in that context of a planet and to think that there is a loving God, an all loving God, is just amazing to me. It's ludicrous to me. Sorry, I didn't mean to do that. Not from the 5 heartbeats. What do these guys don't do? I want to sign you to my label. You know, oh my goodness. But yeah, Christians tell us that God has a personal relationship with all of us. There was a song, I got my piano here, I'm tempted to play it, but there was a song that came out a few years ago. See, y'all always getting me off track, but there was a song that came out a few years ago. Kirk Franklin pulled a few artists together for Haiti. And it was like, is there anybody out there listening? And does anybody know my name? No, my friends, we were not there, but we're here and we care. And yes, we hear your prayers. And so stuff like that. And I was thinking about that one and I was like, damn, so that's just meaningless. So it's just like, and in the video, they're like showing people stuck under rubble and stuff like, it's very emotional. Like I can't watch the video without crying. And the lyrics to the song is like, no, we can't do shit, but you can pray about it, because Jesus is out there somewhere. And I'm like, wow, the audacity of belief. That is just amazing to me. Like you could literally be singing about the ways you can't do a damn thing and be singing it so passionately that I can't help but to cry. I can't help. I'm like, oh, damn, you done got me. No, we can't do a damn thing, but damn, this is a good song. That's like when Jasmine Sullivan was singing that song, you know, In Love with Another Man. She sang the song so well that I'm like, damn, if a woman ever gonna tell me she cheating on me, baby, please sing it like that. Oh my God, I'm sorry. Let me get back on it. So my big point is that we see here that knowledge is mediated through human processes here. And so what this tells us is that the divine figure delegates knowledge gathering to appointed humans, mirroring how ancient kings ruled via scribes and generals. All right? It demonstrates a worldview in which even the highest being is entwined in human systems of record keeping and decision making. Oh man, this is good. Ooh, heartbeats. I don't want to disrespect my imaginary favorite humans. Yeah, please don't do that. Please don't disrespect Duck, man. Please don't, not JT. Oh man, and I'm still with Flash too when, you know, okay, don't get me singing. Don't get me singing. Oh man. Men can't find no rest, found some rest, where you go. That's it, yes. They use the gospel to not do anything. Isn't that so true? All right, so another thing we see in this, and I got to keep rolling, is that God's knowledge is localized, not universal. So Yahweh dwells in the tabernacle. And these are the notes that I pulled from the one question. And again, this is the stuff that's in the study guide. But these are the notes that I pulled from the one question: why would God need a census? You know. So what we see here is God's knowledge is localized. These are my ways of answering that. This God is geographically bound. We talked about this in the book of Exodus with Jason from Dragons and Genesis. We also talked about this while going through the book of Leviticus, and that this God is somehow accessed. If I'm going to lend myself credence to the superstition, he's accessed through some type of ritual portals, you know, like some type of Stargate. Somewhere there's a Stargate at the top of the mountain, and that's how God is interacting. or more likely, and this is a part of another one of my hypotheses, which I'll be unveiling in the the African connection behind Abrahamic religions, that it is more likely, instead of them accessing a god or a cosmic mind through some type of ritualistic portal, that they were likely going to some port of the sea. So the first question that we ask coming out of this Numbers, and we're talking through Numbers chapter 1 through 10, what Rainbow remembers, me talking about the city, because instead of them going to these portals, one of my hypotheses is that they're actually going to exchange in some port city or some type of trade city with a vassal lord, something like that, that at this moment, and this is actually some of the stuff that I'm going to be highlighting in the documentary that we'll be doing, that it is likely that Israel, even though they're being portrayed in the Bible, or our presupposition in the Bible is that they are an independent nation state, that it's possible that they are at this moment very much still a vassal state, which would explain some of the things that we don't quite have answers for in this aspect. So, but that's where we were going with that. I blame penguins. I like that. I'm using that one. And we're back up. That's beautiful. So look, we had jumped down from like 58. We had jumped from 58 to 19 when the stream froze. We're all the way back up at 36 now. Let's keep them numbers going. That is beautiful. I love it. Oh, that's beautiful. All right. So the next question that I had, because I felt that this was important, and so this is again is another thing that's in the guide, is this Israel's first census, right? Because stuff like that sticks out to me. We've been doing this Bible study. We started with Book of Genesis chapter 1. We've gone through Exodus. We've gone through Leviticus. This is actually the first detailed tribe-wide census of the Israelites in the biblical narrative. And of course, Moses is commanded to take this census of everybody who's 20 years or older. And there are a few precedents before this, but none of those are census in the traditional sense. So we do know that coming out of Egypt, there were 600,000 men leaving Egypt, according to the narrative. Now, I don't believe that for 1 second, but according to the narrative, there are 600,000 men that came out of it. And then also in Exodus chapter 30, God gives them instructions. On how to pay their shekels when they're doing their census, even though the census hasn't happened yet. And then in the book of Genesis chapter 46, we get a lineage of the descendants of Jacob. But of course, again, that's still not a census. This is the first time where there is a command to take a census from among the people. And for those of you that are just joining, we are in the book of Numbers tonight, starting with the first chapters 1 through 10. What makes this census unique is, number one, it's the first formal national census of Israel in the wilderness. It ties their identity to military readiness, which is marking a shift from toward nation state formation. And it's administrative, ritualized, and gender specific. So these are some things that you kind of call out in this, and it makes the transition from tribe to organized polity under divine superstitious structure. All right, so those are some things that we pull immediately out of just those first few chapters, or the first chapter, chapter 1. So let's kind of get back into this. Let's jump down to chapter 2. All right, so, and did I hit everything in chapter 1? Well, actually, there is something else that I did want to hit in this. And do I have another note on the census? I just want to make sure. Let me look at these. Israel's move. All right, nope, we're good. All right, a few things that I do want to pull out before moving on from chapter 1 is the census equals consolidation. It's not just about numbers. It's about organizing power, legitimizing leadership, and defining who has place in that system. And then what you see here is that, of course, God is not omniscient, and the importance of knowing who's among you, and we see why that's key. All right, number 2 is power flows from visibility. Recognizing, this is important for us because we can start paying attention to recognizing who's erased in foundational system, because that's what helps us fight for equity today. So for example, when I was reading the Bible as a pastor, it never even dawned on me that, hey, this is discrimination, that God doesn't want people who have bad vision, or people who walk with a limp, or people who are short. It never even crossed my mind that this is discrimination for this God to be operating this way. But now reading it, you can see by who's excluded, by different ways that we can work to build something better. One of those important asks that we can pull out of chapters like this is who gets counted in your world and who gets excluded. You know, when it comes to when it's time for anything, when it's time for progress, when it's time for resources, when it's time for education, when it's time for access, who gets counted in your world and who gets excluded. So you see how we pulled some good preaching out of that? All right, chapter 2. Let's roll. Now I said 10 chapters, I don't know. But we've actually, even though we've only worked in one chapter, we've been talking through the first 10 chapters because a lot of it is repetitive. All right, so chapter 2, to give you this outline, verse 1 through 2 are instructions for tribal arrangement around the tabernacle. Verses 3 through 31, they set up 4 tribal camps, east, south, west, north, and they're all laid out with military precision. And then verses 32 through 34, Israel is, told to follow the ordered systems exactly. Yeah, he always discriminates, man. He's a discriminator. He's a discriminator, a master discriminator. A masternator, is that a thing? Is God a masternator? All right, so key themes in this one are the tribal camps are to be in perfect symmetry with the tabernacle, which is the seat of centralized power in the middle. And of course, this isn't just about tents for them. It's a cosmic model of society with power at the center, rank on the outside, And so one of the questions I had is, what was the Israelites' understanding of cosmology at this time? And how does what we see in this chapter reflect that? So I pulled together some notes on that, and I'm going to switch over to those real quick so we can talk about Israel's cosmology, because then that gives you a better understanding of what they're laying out. There it is. What they're laying out with their temple design up. Army by town, PAL regiments. Wow. All right, so in brief, Israel's understanding of cosmology, and again, this is what's kind of expressed in their temple design, their kind of understanding of cosmology is there are these 3 realms, and we'll start with, keep it as simple as possible, the heavens, and that can be delineated into further the earth, and then the wilderness and the chaos, and that can be delineated into further. And the heavens, this is the realm of the divine, pure, and of course it's inaccessible, which this wasn't unique to Israelite cosmology. One of the things that mystery religions like Christianity represented in their infancy was a change, not linear, of course, but a change in the social mindset of humanity towards divinity. Prior to that, by far and large, access to the heavens was restricted to the humans. There was a separate place that you go. You don't go where the gods are. That's, little by little, stories begin integrating where you started getting demigods and legendary, and then you get the demigods who sometimes can get in, then you get a legendary character who might be able to do something special and get in and get a seat at the table with the gods. But then around this turn, when you start getting, and again, this isn't linear, but you start getting more mystery cults, and a major factor among many of these mystery cults is that this place of heaven that used to be inaccessible is now easily, or not easily, but now more easily accessible to either a mystery group of people, or as we see in many modern progressive religious ideologies, to everybody, right? But at this time, heaven is an inaccessible realm, which is why the further you go into the temple, the more inaccessible it becomes for the priest. And so this is typically, this was represented by them by the Holy of Holies in the tabernacle interior, and then the earth, which represents human life, society, struggle, and movement. The outer court and the tribal encampments represent that. And then the wilderness or the chaos is the outside world, which is danger and purity and enemies. And that's pretty much anything outside of the camp perimeter. And I always think that's probably the best way to talk about the children of Israel, because I know as a pastor, even when reading about them in the Numbers, in the book of Numbers, in the book of Leviticus and Deuteronomy, I talk about them as if they're an established kingdom, and I'm like, no, this is a traveling camp at this moment, you know. But this reflects a tripartite cosmology common to many ancient Near Eastern cultures, and what makes Israel's version unique is how it was ritualized, mobilized, and hierarchical, right? So the tabernacle was a scaled down cosmic structure for them. They had the Holy of Holies, which was supposed to be Yahweh's throne room, the divine realm, the holy place, which is the space of divine human mediation or meditation. This is where heaven touches the earth, which as a former charismatic, that's something that spoke to me. I love that. And honestly, it was that type of ideology that ends up leading me to become a person who ends up putting my humanism above my theism, where I decided like I would never be more committed to a God than I would to humanity. And then that was a decision that I made in 2014. But a part of that was because for the past decade prior to that, I had definitely embraced and fallen in love with this ideology of heaven on earth. Heaven is supposed to be more like earth. And it's so funny, the heaven that I was trying to create on earth wasn't a heaven that was actually represented in the Bible, but it was my own humanistic understanding of what the world needed, you know, or what I thought the world needed, you know, people being, you know, taken care of and stuff. And that's what it's supposed to be. And that's what God wants. And then you begin to realize, like, no, that actually isn't what God wants, and I'm actually projecting that on God. So anyway, which again, I think we'll see a lot of that in Scripture. And so then they have the courtyard, which is the human activity, purification, sacrifice, the camp, ordered society, which is mirroring this sacred design, and then outside of the camp, again, the wilderness, impurity, chaos, and the unknown. Now, this isn't just symbolic. It's logistical cosmology. The Levites literally, according to this narrative, are carrying the cosmos piece by piece. The movement is choreographed as ritual reenactment of divine order subduing chaos, you know. So that's kind of the introduction that's in that guide. It's funny how churches aren't like that now. Did you think churches are trying to become modern when you were a pastor? Yes, absolutely. For the most part, the churches that I was a part of, that was our thing. We were the urban contemporary seeker-friendly churches. We modernization. I wouldn't have called it secularization then, but that's exactly what it was. We were secularizing. We had, and you know, and this is something that kind of happens. Is I'll call it generational depreciation, where like with each generation, there's a greater gap, or maybe even generational degradation, but there's a greater, or deprecation even, but there's a greater gap in connection to the tradition of how it has to be. And so I come from a tradition of pastors and ministers who rejected traditional expressions of religion and felt that religion, in order to be relevant, must mirror the message of the time. And I felt that that's what God wanted. I felt that that was my biblical understanding, because that's what you do when you have to reconcile. And I guess I'll talk right at y'all for a moment. That's what you do when you have to reconcile a God who changes. If you're going to recognize a God who changes in the Bible, then it creates room for a God then who needs to change for today. And of course, the way that I was able to butter that in my head, if you will, butter that bread in my head, which now I do want some buttered bread. But the way I was able to butter that in my head is that it wasn't that God was changing. Hallelujah. It was that our understanding of God was evolving, you know, which again, you just kind of throwing the people under the bus to protect God in that sense, while overlooking the fact, well, no, but if God is omniscient, all powerful, then that should have prevented that misunderstanding. But no, so yes, many pastors were doing that. Again, I was a part of that movement. This is one of the reasons, unashamedly and unapologetically, why I am as effective as I am at what I do, is because that's what we train. I didn't learn how to be an effective pastor from the Bible. There's nothing in the Bible that teaches you how to be an effective pastor if pastoring is building a community and taking the temperature of that community and making sure you're responding to the perceived needs of the people who are connecting to that community from a ritualistic perspective. You don't learn that from scripture. So we learn that stuff through industrial organizational psychology, which actually I'm so glad that you asked that question, because it pivots into a lot of stuff that's actually in this guide, because that's what I was pulling on. My understanding of industrial organizational psychology, sociology, and using that to create some conversational points that we haven't even got in yet, though. I love this. Thank y'all. All right, so let's keep rolling. So what we see here is spatial cosmology and camp formation. And again, I'm not going to go over all of this. If you are a patron, you don't have to buy this. This is going to be made available for you for free. I mean, paid patron, of course. If you're a paid patron, if you're a free patron, I love you so much. I'm not trying to discriminate. I'm sorry, but for paid patrons, this will be made for you for free. For those of you that don't want to be a paid patron, you can get this content guide on our Windows shop. All right, so you have a spatial cosmology. Let me see else what I want to hit on cosmology before going. Yes, okay. So with no deity actually directing this, what's the purpose of such an elaborate cosmological mimicry? These are the type of questions that I have. And so what this cosmology does, it's a social order mapped out onto sacred order. And I want you to notice that there's a large percentage of our species that still leans towards this type of need. And damn, I think I just highlighted it in myself too. But you think of how many people who attach their lives to astrology. Am I saying the right one? Yeah, to astrology. Born in this month or whatever, born under this moon, this star, rising Mercury, whatever. That stuff. There are people who feel to have, I don't want to call it a need, I'll just call it a lean, a tendency to want to feel like their life has some type of cosmological justification and that their movements have some type of cosmological validation. That's why the whole horoscopes industry survives, and it isn't just horoscopes, even fortune cookies, which I can at least appreciate fortune cookies better because they be funny sometimes. But no, that's why this whole industry exists. So we still do this same thing, but that's also why so many people get caught up. Like some people want to believe the earth is flat, not because they have, well, nobody has any good reason to believe it, but not because they have any good reason to believe it, but simply because they want to protect the idea that they have an understanding of cosmology. And for many of them, that understanding of cosmology, even for those that don't identify as Christians, for many of them, their understanding of cosmology is still based on Judaic ideologies. And so they're flat earthers because they believe Genesis is true, and they want to believe that they have an appropriate, Myers-Briggs does even get caught in that net. You're not wrong. And that's what I was going to say about myself. Okay, so as a sociologist, someone who is low-key obsessed with industrial organized psychology, that's why for those of you who get the guide, you're going to see a lot of that in here. I do like low key. I'm revealing one of my superstitions, right? I low key, like that's how I look at order and organization. That one of the sayings that I have is that organization is the language of life, because I'm fascinated about the way cells organize themselves, and where there is organization, there's life, and where there's disorganization, not so much, not so much. But no, so I even do that, and that's even though it's not at the cosmological scale that we typically think of, at the end of the day, it's all cosmology, right? I fall in that. So we kind of have that, an inkling. I like that. we kind of fall into that I definitely do. I don't want to speak for everybody, but I definitely fall into that leaning sometimes of wanting to know that, ooh, here it is, that I'm living by design and not just by default. You know what I'm saying? And so I kind of feel that. But then not only does it give them this social order that's mapped onto this sacred order, but also it gives them a justification for a hierarchy, which I want you to notice sometimes you'll still see this type of language in modern churches today. Whether they're talking about justification for the man being over the woman, whether it's justification for the preacher being the head of the church, whether it's justification for God being who God is, many times people will try to pull on very natural examples, cosmological examples as to why you should believe this. Well, of course, there's a God who watches over the earth. There's a sun that shines light on the earth, and it's that leaning, if you will, to kind of have that cosmological alignment. And then, of course, there's also a sense of control in the wilderness, which, of course, if you imagine they're in this wilderness, the night sky at this moment is probably becoming a major part of their life. So they're developing a really good relationship with the night sky. I'm almost positive all of their little local hubs and hangout spots while they're in the wilderness, how we ask how's the weather today, they probably talking about the skies. So this gives them a sense of control and comfort to have something to talk about that's related to the vast, strange new world they're in, and a shared identity rooted in divine geography. So the people don't just travel together, they embody the cosmos. And in doing so, they perform obedience as existence. And so the goal becomes to exist in the right place, in the right formation. It's to align with life itself. Damn, that's good. Who knew you could pull some stuff like that? Who knew you could pull some stuff like that out of there? Damn, that's good. When I see your name, oh, that's funny. I definitely had friends within my church. Everybody that was on my staff were my friends. I'm a fairly friendly person if you're working with me. If you're not working with me and I'm trying to work, I'm not as friendly. But I'm a fairly friendly person. But yeah, I was friends with my members. So again, to exist in the right place, in the right formation for them, is to align with life itself. And notice how you will hear language like this, not just in church, but also in the motivation racket. And again, the churches I come from, that was definitely kind of our language. It's about being in the right place in the right time. It's about your due season. Your time is here. Your next level is right around the corner. All of that stuff, being in the right place in the right time, because, and again, that's ultimately what religion is, or how religious superstition evolves, is the moment you begin to get an inclination that there's something about this world that works in a way that you are drastically removed from. One of the things that begins to happen is you begin to manifest an existential hopelessness that you will never be able to understand life. And so you feel that there must be some miracle way to shortcut the process. And that's what religion is. Religion is a way to religious superstition, rather. Let me clarify that. Religious superstition is a way to shortcut our misunderstandings. Dang, that's good. And so then we start looking for signs, Then we start looking for, oh, this means I'm in the right place in the right time, And so the final takeaway from the cosmological piece is the Israelites, for them, they didn't need to explain the universe. They carried it. And for them, the proof of God being pleased with them, or the proof of them being blessed, was evidence that they were walking this thing, that they had a proper cosmological understanding, or at least from this point of view. Now we're going to dive into this a little deeper. So again, the design of the camp and tabernacle in Numbers 1 through 10 reveals a cosmology where space, power, purity, and ritual are one and the same. So it's not speculative theology, it's spatialized ideology disguised as divine instruction. If y'all are enjoying this, would y'all drop some fire in the chat? I just realized we've made it all the way back to over 50 viewers. Man, I'm so glad to see y'all hanging out with us tonight. I hope you're enjoying it. So we've been kind of walking through these, and man, this has been good. We had a 15-minute interruption earlier with some technical difficulties, but we got through them. So I've been walking through some stuff. So let me give some notes here. Whew. These words are too big. That's hilarious. Does motivational speeches always twist the Bible to be in a positive light? That's pretty much what it was. Pretty much what it was. We would take all the ugly out the Bible and make it sound so loving, make it sound so motivating. But you had to do a lot of ignoring, a lot of twisting, a lot of ice. What we called it was building a bridge of contemporization. I love y'all. I'm glad to see the emoticons and stuff running up in the chat. Y'all are beautiful, man. Y'all are beautiful. All right, so I want to give some other insight on this. So let's jump into this. So approaching the census and numbers through the lens of industrial organizational psychology. Again, this is in the guide, not only reveals not only the strategic value of taking stock of human resources for mobilization, but also potential best practices and cautionary insights for organizing secular communities today. And I'm telling you, this is what I got excited about when I was pulling these notes together, is that, because I told y'all last week, I wanted to make sure that, no, we're going to learn the Bible, we're going to laugh at the bullshit, but I also want to make sure that we're able to pull something out of these moments that can either empower us to live our lives personally, individually, or empower us to do better at building communities. So I thought numbers would be a great place to pull some of that out, because we got some good points here. So the first points I want to pull out is what the census does well in the book of Numbers. And we're hyper-focusing on chapters 1 through 10 tonight. The census made it clear who belonged to which tribe, who was fit for what, and who held leadership positions. And so a good principle that's out of this, and I don't expect all y'all to remember this tonight. Again, we're working to up the quality on the show, and that's why I do thank all of our patrons, all of our super chatters, all of our fan funders, all of our donors, because it's you who've allowed us to make it this far, and eventually we'll have lower thirds for all of this stuff jumping across. But a good principle that we see demonstrated in Numbers is role clarity and organizational structure, which improves coordination, morale, and accountability. And the reason I'm sharing this so that we could possibly understand what some of the practical reasons these things might have been that these things might have been happening outside of the presumption that there is a deity attached, right? And so the takeaway here is that even in decentralized or collaborative movements, people thrive when they know where they fit, what they contribute, and how they relate to others. See, like, even from the bullshit, that's something that we can learn out of Numbers chapter 1. So for those of you who engage this content because you're passionate about community, for those of you who watch this content because you're passionate about building secular community, building local community, or just building community for whatever you want to go on, here's a great takeaway from tonight. People thrive when they know where they fit, what they contribute, and how they relate to others. And that's work that we have to do as a community. So another thing that we see here is that it enabled resource planning as far as the census. So by counting eligible men, leadership could anticipate needs. They could anticipate how much food is needed, what type of housing is needed, supplies, defense. This is a principle that we obviously use today. I am not in any way suggesting that they originated these principles. There were other nations, other people groups using these as well. But this is an example of workforce planning, and it's key to scaling and sustainability. And so the takeaway for this one is knowing the strengths, numbers, and capabilities and the capacities of your community enables smarter growth and event planning. Now, so I've hit two of the things that we can learn from them. There's a few more in the guide. I want to hit two of the cautions too. And because this is something I already kind of called out when we were going through chapter 1 and 2, but a caution and a limit to avoid is over-quantification can flatten people. All right. This is one of the reasons why even in our community for Bridge City Global, I pulled back on our cry for volunteers. For like a whole 6 to 8 months, I was like, we need volunteers, and we need volunteers for this, for this, for this, for this. We were gonna build all these big teams, and it's primarily because I'm looking at the numbers, I'm looking at how we grow, and based on the way we're growing, we need a whole lot of people in order to manage all of these, in order to manage the growth of the community. But I realized our growth is unrealistic. So because our growth is unrealistic, it's absolutely unrealistic to think that we're going to have these volunteers who are ready for these things. So I pulled back from these, because then all of these volunteer roles that we need, especially the high expectations, high execution ones, they have a lot of quantification to come to them. And this early in the game, over-quantification can absolutely flatten people, right? And so in this case, you begin to think, this is what I need, and only these people fit. So the biblical census ignored women, elders, children, and anyone unfit. It measured function, not personhood. All right? So it ignored women, elders, children, and anyone unfit. So now this is something that I even pulled from my project management days. Metrics should inform, not define identity. So over-reliance on function leads to burnout, exclusion, or hidden talents being ignored. So in the secular community, we have to be mindful not to reduce members to skill inventories and actually encourage holistic engagement. Questions like, how can you contribute, balanced by, how can this community serve you? That's some good stuff. And then, of course, rigid structures exclude nonconformity, And so the big point here is that there's actually a lot of things that the secular community can learn from the census in theory and in practice. Alex says, if I was struggling with my faith, how would you encourage me to try and still remain in the church? I wouldn't. I don't know. I wouldn't. All right. So, but I am going to ask you, Alex, to stay on topic, or I might have to boot you, man. So, or if you want to, you can send one of your questions with a super chat. But it is super rude to keep asking questions that are off topic. Don't do that, man. Don't do it. All right. So the biggest point is that there are things that even when going through some of this stuff that we can learn from the failures. There are positives that we can learn. There are negatives we can learn. It is all here. What we get a picture of here is early Israelite guidance. We've talked early Israelite governance. We talked through their cosmology. I've shared a little organizational insight. And now what I want to kind of hit, there's, oh man, we do see another question that I had was about the division of labor. Because if you're doing a census, there's this aspect of labor obviously involved in it. And so for those of you who are interested in that, I have a complete breakdown of this in the guide. But we know the census was interested in men who are 20 plus years, 20 or older. And then after that, you also have your tribal leaders, then you have your Levites, then you have your priests, and then you have Moses. And that's kind of the hierarchy here. And this type of system is ultimately a proto-industrial military religious bureaucracy. That's what we're seeing them establish here. A ritualized, controlled task segmentation, institutional preservation of type of power. I know, a lot of big words. I break those down in there. Oh man, I hate that, man. I'll have to catch y'all later. I don't know what's going on. Now there's clipping. But there's not showing there. That is getting a little high. All right, so there's division of labor. And then there's this point when you get to the end where Moses finally hears from God, right? And so one of the things that I add to the guide is what actually happens here. What is happening when Moses hears from God? What's actually going on? This isn't divine communication. It's the final step in a multi-chapter sequence of legitimization. The whole buildup of Numbers 7, which is the 12-day parade of identical offerings from each tribe, serves to ritually prepare the space and validate the leadership. Only after all of that is when Moses can enter the tent, the tabernacle is fully supplied, and then operationally, he begins to hear the divine voice, which is very interesting that they make this. Thank you, Muttley. Thank you. Charleston, South Carolina is in the building. All right, So it's only in this, what's interesting is that they make this call out, but Book of Numbers chapter 1, they make this call out at the end of chapter 10, but at the beginning of chapter 1, it opens up with, and the Lord said to Moses. So it's like, whoa, if Moses isn't hearing from God in the chapter 10, who the hell is he talking to in chapter 1? These are questions that I'd be having. You know what I'm saying? Things that go past my mind, who is he talking to? So these are things that I had to think about. So in short, what you see here is that ritual performance activates authority in these lines. And so the line is telling the audience, now that everything has been done properly, leadership is authorized to make decisions. That's what this idea of Moses, thank you, Rob, I appreciate you. That's what this idea of Moses hearing from God at the end is, in my opinion, is supposed to be conveying, is that now that everything is done properly, now leadership is authorized to make decisions. And so what we see here, as far as I'm concerned, is that the voice is not a supernatural voice. It's narrative shorthand for political legitimacy. Oh, I want to say that again. That felt like preaching. Like, so, and this, again, this is all a part of my little hypothesis, is that maybe the people who were putting together these stories, maybe that's how they saw it as well, is that for them, they weren't thinking that this is a voice of God, but that this terminology, the voice of God, is narrative shorthand. And there is precedents for that when we look at other nations within that area who had already gravitated to that ideology long before. Polytheistic nations who had, yes, at one point believed in literal gods, but had sociologically evolved to a point where they still had the language, they still had the linguistics, but they no longer believed in that God. And so now the gods themselves were ultimately just a personification of leadership and personification of the direction of leadership. So again, narrative shorthand for political legitimacy. So by saying Moses heard the Lord, the text is signaling that Moses now speaks with ultimate authority. It's providing a mythic stamp of approval to his coming actions and closing the loop: obedience, access, command. Look at that, there's a formula there. Moses is obedient to the instructions of the Lord, to what is supposed to be happening for the people. He's created the access systems. Now he's in command. And so it's not that the divine spoke, it's that the system was secure enough to claim divine speech. And then what we're seeing in this is a centralization of communication. So this verse subtly makes it clear that only Moses hears, not Aaron, not Aaron, not the tribal leaders, not even the priests. So this is investing in Moses' executive authority. Moses hearing the voice of God, according to my hypothesis, is Moses, because I mean, that's what it is in practice, in the narrative, is at this moment, Moses is the representative of executive authority, not just for this wandering group of people, but for this evolving nation. And again, this is why one of my, which we'll hit in my documentary, why I kind of view that it might be possible that Israel is under the vassalship of some other nation, because it almost seems that they are meeting requirements from someone else in order to get approval to be recognized within this type of situation. So before you can get these type of resources, before we can include you into our trade stuff, you need to have these systems set up, these systems in place, and then we will have this. And at that moment in a vassal relationship, you will get some type of sigil that gives you that executive authority. So that's my speculation in that piece. Man, this is beautiful that we still got over 50 people in here. Dang it, I love this. All right, so Moses becomes the interface between myth and movement. He speaks for the voice that no one else hears, giving him the interpretive power. And so in practical terms, the purpose of this scene is that leadership is now publicly validated to give commands. Ritual creates the condition for claimed authority, so no one can just claim this authority. Moses had to go through these rituals. These other priests had to go through these rituals, and these rituals, watch this, are highly dangerous. And I have like 5 whole sections in this guide about 2 sections in this guide on about the rituals and their danger. But the rituals are dangerous, which means not everybody should want to do this, which this is something we still do today. Sometimes we try to overinflate the responsibilities of the boss so that other people don't want to be the boss. Some of your parents may have did it when you were growing up. They come home and act extra tired, than they were. But no, this could be an overinflation. Oh yeah, if you're a priest, you don't want to be a priest, because if you're a priest, you could die for doing the wrong thing. This is trying to, in my opinion, could be something trying to keep other people from vying for power by making access to authority ritualistic. And then the symbolic placement of authority, which is centralized, untouchable, mysterious, and only certain people have access to it. But then you can think about that through the religious superstition lens, but then you can also think about that through the political strategy lens as well, or governmental lens, in the sense that in the same way, someone in our government, some department in our government likely has access to more information than any of us are comfortable with them having. And it's that information that they are supposed to be leaning on in order to make decisions, and not just anybody can have access to that information. And that information, watch this, requires ritual access. And so people, in order to get, damn, that's good. And so in order for people to get access to that information, or at least it used to be, I don't know what they're doing today, but at least it used to have to go through ritual access. And yeah, we try to make it sound harder than it might actually be to discourage anybody from just willy-nilly wanting access to that power. So you can see some things when we look at it through those lens, that there are quite a few things there. All right, so, and I wasn't too mad at that question, y'all, but no, Messenger reveals, we modded you out. We be on the gun here. I didn't see it. One of my mods got you, but it's okay. But no, that's a beautiful, actually, I'm not mad at that question. I don't think Moses existed at all. So I don't think Moses was influenced by Egypt at any bit. I think that story is likely conflated with some other stories, but I do think I think Hebrew culture is reminiscent of African culture in a lot of ways. Hence why I'm doing a whole documentary on it. All right, so the final thing I want to hit on this aspect, and then we'll get ready to land this plane tonight, is that what we see here is that ritual doesn't unlock the voice of God. It unlocks the legitimacy to speak as if one had unlocked the voice of God. So the divine voice that we see in Numbers is not revelation. Earlier I said it's at the end of chapter 10, it's at the end of chapter 7. It's not revelation, it's the codification of authority through performance. You performed this right, now God blessed you. You did everything God wanted you to do, now you're the one in command. This is basically like an inauguration at this moment. The system is built, the leader has entered, and now the commands to come are binding. Now, some other things that I include in the guide from tonight, again, our patrons, you'll get this. I may play around with dropping it in Discord. We'll see. One of the things that you will see here is that I did include something, because we talked about economies in this and what type of economy and division of labor this is. I include some information in this guide about what a collaborative economy will look like, free collaborative, and what some examples look like. So that should get your attention. Some questions that we answered tonight is, why does God need a census? We also answered, is this Israel's first census? One of the things that I included in this guide, and I'll hit this real quick, is why they include this census in the mythology, right? Because again, one of those first questions is the idea of the census completely undermines God as an omniscient or omnipresent being. Now, again, my perspective that we later superimposed omniscience into this character. Because so far we're in Numbers, and God has not been omniscient in not Nan chapter, nor are any of the gods we've seen so far been all omnipresent or all powerful. So my question then was, okay, why do we need the census? But now that we're operating from the assumption that I typically operate from, is that there is no God involved in any of this at all. That there is no God involved in any of this at all, then what we're looking at this moment is there has to be some practical reason for this, which that's pretty easy to see, but I wanted to give some of this to you. Number one, for military registry, and that's where we start with chapter 1, the military focus. This is to number one, or to both prepare for conquest and to show readiness for conquest, which, but this is also to establish their political hierarchy, their national identity, what ritual legitimacy looks like, how they manage resources, to establish divine authority, and to provide them with a narrative arc. So what this does for them, and this is what you see, their story matches their cosmology. Their story is there once was a state of perfection, but ever since we've been here, or as long as we've been evolved, it's been chaos. And our earliest stories are all chaos. There was a man and a woman, and they got kicked out of a garden because of chaos. That man and the woman's children killed each other because of chaos. Then God had destroyed all of the planet except for one family and the animals because of chaos. And then people continued to do stuff because of chaos. Abraham was out there spreading, venereal diseases because of chaos. And then Joseph ends up leading his people into probably one of the most prosperous times in their lives, but they end up getting, somehow tricked into slavery because of chaos. And so their whole narrative arc is how we came from chaos. What Numbers is setting from them is that this is the moment where we finally got it together. And all of the stories that came before them, that's, yes, the soliloquy of chaos. I love it. It's their whole story. Damn, that's gangster. Yeah, it is. Their whole story of this is where we came from. And this census, this first official census, which we highlighted when we first opened up tonight's conversation, this first official census is their way of saying we are officially somebody. And remember, that's the promise that Yahweh makes to Israel when they're in Exodus. He says, you are not a people. And that's one of the ways that we misread this. He says, you are not a people. I will take a people who are not a people, and then I will make you a people, and then I will be your God. Because again, as I pointed out when we were going through the book of Genesis and Leviticus, that's the qualification to have a God. In order for you to have a God, you have to be a people, because God only speaks to groups and representatives of groups. That's just how God works, So in order for you to be a people, you have to be organized. Dang. So you kind of see some stuff in there, which is why in the content guide, I share so much about organization. All right, so that was one. I wasn't meaning to spend as much time on that as I was. Another thing that I highlight in this guide is what is the ritual work in this context? Because we get a lot of instructions in chapters 1 through 10 of what everybody has to bring to the offering, and as they're delineating or delegating responsibility, everyone has these tasks. So there are these purification rites. There are, of course, ordeals, such there's the issue if a woman is suspected to be caught in an adulterous affair, and the priest is going to give her basically this holy dirt serum that if she was in an affair, then she's going to have a miscarriage. That's God's prescribed miscarriage there. But you see that kind of happen there's the offerings and the sacrifices. There are the lighting, the lamps, the setting out bread, maintaining spatial order. And so there's a lot of that going on. Long story short is I break all of that down in this guide and kind of give you this. And so I'm gonna give you the summation of that. Why is ritual work important in this system? They do it for several reasons. Number one, social cohesion is what you're seeing here. It's to make the people feel one through shared experience, right? And this is a practice that as a social species, we still do. We still have national holidays. Shout out to the holiday we've started as an organization. Keep rising. Yeah, keep rising season, starting this Sunday, lasting all the way to what is traditionally known as Easter. But national holidays, teen chants, even marching bands, all of these things are there for social cohesion. But then also labor division, just hit 18,000. Ain't that, man, that's just beautiful. And we still have over 50 people in this stream. Like, God dang it, this is good, man. This is so good. Oh, man. Oh, man. So labor division, and then there's also legitimization, makes human rule seem divinely ordered. All right, so I see we have a jackass in the chat, so I'll address the jackass. And again, the comment that the jackass made was that I was lying because I said God only speaks to groups or leaders of groups. And then the person gives an example of God speaking to someone who is carrying the leader of a group. So I'm like, nah, bruh. See, here's the thing. If you're gonna be a jackass, don't be a dumbass. That's my only thing. If you're gonna be a jackass, be a smartass. Make sure you know what the fuck you're talking about. Because unfortunately, and now you're going to unlock that petty in me. And yes, I'm unapologetically petty. And so once I see you're a dumbass, I feel like it's my obligation as the Prince of Petty to call that shit out to make sure that everybody sees, So I just had to say that real quick. But yeah, it's supposed to do nothing if the woman is faithful. Yes, which actually means if this potion is actually potent, it literally means every time the woman would have been pregnant, she would have been forced into a miscarriage. And we know what would have been happened after that, because then she would have been typically stoned because she would have been an adulterer. So yeah, this is just bad all around. So even if she wasn't cheating, even if it was her husband's child, the baby is gone, if the potion is efficacious. If the potion is not efficacious, then it's just flipping a coin, Oh, man, but they keep coming back, trolling with my homies. I love that, Muttley. That is dope. That is dope. I guess my last little trolling rant just pushed us up because we're almost at 60 people over. All right, so the ritual work is important to them in the context of this narrative because of social cohesion, labor division, legitimization, emotional regulation, discipline, maintaining order without brute force, and identity signaling, which we still do that. So it shows who's in or who's out. I don't know how many of schools y'all went to, but at one school I went to, we had what do you call them? Some school had hall monitors. We didn't have hall monitors, but we had something. I don't know what we did, bus monitors. I don't know, but we were out there. We'd get those badges, and you really wanted to be one of those things because you get those sashes with the badge on it. You wanted to be one of those. This is identity signaling, Political rituals do this. Religious dress codes do this. But not even, I said political rituals and religious dress codes, but then we also have political dress codes. So if you're running for office, they're gonna make sure you wear the right color tie, because the color of your tie is not just the color of your tie, it's an identity signal, right? But we see all types of identity signals. As a Black man who's lived in the South for the majority of my life, I've always recognized the Confederate flag or the rebel flag as an identity signal. In the same way that the rest of the United States is starting to recognize certain red hats as an identity signal. And of course, all identity signals are not negative by nature, but it just shows you that identity signaling is still very much a part. Oh, I love that. Oh, that's hilarious. Very much a part of what we still do as a society. And so in the guide, I do share some takeaways. I'm not going through all of it tonight, not because I'm trying to rob you of the information in there. I promise you not. It's because I want to give you as much information as possible while also showing you what's in there. So I do give some notes on modern framework. I think we've kind of hit some of the major things. I talked about Moses hearing God. I think I want to close this out with, there's a whole section on the early Israelites' governance and how that was kind of seen. And again, this isn't created as far as the guide. It's not created as a book that you just read through. It is created as a guide. There's questions in there that you can ask. There's little hot points in there. So it's really cool. But I think I want to close tonight's conversation with highlighting the secular voice of God. And I know that's a weird thing to say. They keep on trolling, they hating. I love it. Hearing the voice of God, in my humble opinion, what we're seeing in Numbers chapter 1 through 10, what I think the composers of these stories were trying to convey possibly is that the voice of God is equivalent with organizational clarity. And I pull that from this perspective of working with startups. And so in startup cultures, especially or any early stage movements, there's a very real phenomenon where the early chaos is full of passion, energy, and movement, but also confusion, misalignment, and disorder. Which, interestingly enough, I didn't think about this when I was doing it in my notes. I did not think about this when I was in my notes. But interestingly enough, that kind of matches where we are with the work that we're doing on this channel. The early stage is definitely, we're basically a startup, so it's filled with a lot of passion, a lot of energy, and a lot of movement right now. There are a lot of hands in places, a lot of people are helping out, but there's also a lot of confusion. There may be some misalignment, and there may be some disorder, because that's the way things typically start. But then through some combination of organizing effort, whether that's vision, structure, team building, and mission clarity, the group reaches a tipping point where the next step suddenly feels obvious. And that clarity is often attributed to something special, or sometimes people even define it as magical. And it's like, we finally heard our voice, or we finally found our why, or it just clicked. And in many cases, what's happening there, and that's what I think of when I read these types of narratives in scripture, with knowing what I know now, is that what's happening there is that now that we're organized, now that we're in a flow, we're actually engaged enough to know who needs what, when they know what, when they need it, to know how we can support, how we can't support, to know what needs to be done, to know what to say that will actually help. And like, that's the power of data. And damn it, okay, I'm gonna geek out a little bit. The whole purpose of organization in a system is to manage the flow of information. So even when the system, whether the system is religious, whether the system is biological, whether the system is social, political, the whole purpose of organizing itself so it can share information. And so that's what we see through the work of the census in the book of Numbers, is that they are gathering information and assigning people to be in places, which is changing the flow of information. And then we're putting Moses and the priesthood at the center of that flow of information. So now, for the first time since they have come out of Israel, Moses has a direct line of access to, as best as he can, to everything that is going on through the priest and the elders. And so now he's having somewhat of an established system. Now he's having somewhat of an established system that allows him to speak and to make decisions with clarity. Because now he can talk with the delegates. He can have conversations, converse with the Congress to see what's going on. Oh man. While running around church property. Oh, that is awesome. That is awesome. So that's one of the major things that I highlighted. There was something else that I wanted to hit before I end tonight. And there's a lot in that. But the real life parallels here of just that startup here is the biblical movement or the biblical moment is, okay, so they built the tabernacle. Startup equivalent is setting up the mission, the platform, and infrastructure. You got the Levite assignments. You got in a startup, you got task delegations and team roles. You got your 12 identical tribal offerings. You got your stakeholder buy-in, fundraising, or partner alignment. Moses hears the voice from the center. The founder or team lead gains clarity and alignment from their teams, right? Only Moses hears the voice of God. This is about centralized decision-making, which is crystallized around shared goals, which I don't think is so much about Moses hearing the voice of God. And again, it's all speculative. It's all fan fiction to me. I think it's more so about Moses becoming the voice of God, or at very least, the voice of Israel, which would be equivalent with the voice of God. And again, my hypothesis is that God is a national, being biblically accurate, Yahweh is a national deity, not a universal God, not a universal cosmic creator. And Yahweh is one of 70, and he has his little portion, and his portion are these, for whatever reason, these small groups of Canaanites, who the Israelites are. Which that shows you how fucked up Yahweh must have been, because they didn't even give him a whole people group. They just, El could have given Yahweh all of the Canaanites. Instead, he just said, you just get this little group of Canaanites. It's very weird. It's very odd, just things that make you go, things that make you go, But I like this type of framing, and I included it in tonight's Bible study with the next pastor, where we learn the Bible and laugh at the bullshit. Because for secular audiences, it demystifies revelation, showing that God spoke may really mean we finally figured it out, especially when you're looking in these contexts. It honors the emergence of collective clarity without supernaturalizing it. And that is something from a sociological perspective that I appreciate about all religious writings, all religious texts. I feel like my stream is starting to mess up. All religious writings is the emergence of collective clarity. And that's not even religious writings, political writings, all of it out there. Everything that we've done as a species, everything that we've done as a people group, we can kind of see that as we work together more, as we organize ourselves better, we get a better clarity of possibilities, of options, of things we can do. And so in a very weird way, we were able to pull that out from the night. This is why I know a lot of you right now are likely overwhelmed. New Jersey in the house. A lot of you are likely overwhelmed about things that are going on in the world, and about, what are you going to do? How are you going to make it? And maybe even like, what can I do? What can I do? And the thing is, you're not going to get the answers to those questions in any satisfying way, in any meaningful way, until you're having more conversations with more people, because it comes from the emergence of collective clarity. One of the things that I resent and I'll cringe, if you want to pull a jackass response out of me, if you want to make me start getting a little condescending, ask me what my plan is to fix anything that involves a large group of people. I might get a little condescending at that moment. But the reason why is because in doing so, we are completely overlooking, ignoring, underestimating how good decisions actually happen. And that is a part of and I didn't mean to do this, but it's here. That is a part of our own our own superstitions that we still have, of needing a hero, of needing a savior, of needing somebody else to have the plan, and overlooking our own capacity to contribute to the plan just by being involved in the conversation. And that's what we're missing sometimes, is we're literally thinking there's some big things that we have to be doing in order to make progress. And I'm like, no, beloved, it's the small things that we are not doing. The first thing we need to be doing, and y'all know I'm an advocate for it, this is why I do what I do, This is why I'm here every Sunday and every Wednesday. This is why I'm dropping new content every week. This is why we have that space on Discord. This is why I'm kicking my ass to make sure we're getting back on base with sending these emails out, which, by the way, y'all should have got an email from us today. It's why I'm doing all of this, to make sure that we're creating space, not where everybody can just hear what I got to say, but where we're creating space where people who have similar ideals about progress and want similar outcomes from the world they live in can start having conversations together. And as we start having those conversations, people will start finding their confidence. People will start finding their own sense of security. And then they will start saying, you know what, I think I want to do this. I think I want to do this. I think I'm ready to take on this responsibility. And then when you get there, then we can make some big things happen. But we're only in position to make it happen then because we've had enough conversations to have some understandings. You know, and at this moment, I'm adverse. Do I have a lot of plans? Yes, but my plans only reflect my ideas, my worldview, my limited scope. And that's why I do try to limit my plans to the things that I'm doing. As far as what we're going to do as people, as far as what we're going to do as a society, as far as what we're going to do as a species, that's going to take some more conversations. And so, yes, if that means you might have to sacrifice a night or two of watching bullshit to spend some time with some people, to have some conversations about some shit that matters, then so be it, because that's what we're going to have to do to get there. But I'm going to do my best to make it easy, to make it comfortable, to make it attractive, so that we all get the picture. But that's what we're seeing on there. Damn, this got good. And I mean, we're literally at the end here. We're literally at the end here, and we're still holding on to over 50 people. And like, my mind is blown. Like, man, who knew that people would be loving Bible study like this, even with all of the technical difficulties we had tonight. But I do want to ask y'all this as I'm closing up, and I don't think I have anything else that I want to hit on this. There was a note, and I know it's in here somewhere, but I don't see it right now. But I know there was something else I wanted to hit about this. Perhaps I'll remember it next week. But speaking of next week we will start. Oh yeah, am I blurry anymore? That's the one thing that I worked on as well this week, which I think is what contributed to the internet issues. Hello, Jello. Hello, Michael. But yes, next week we will be jumping into Numbers chapter 11, and we'll be trying to take on another big chunk. My goal is to get us through the book of Numbers in about 4 or 5 weeks, so that we can continue to get through these stories and pull as much value from them as possible. I'd love to know what your thoughts were about the new flow tonight, about the way that I'm approaching this instead of reading it line by line, but pulling these thoughts together so that we can all kind of look at them or all kind of go through them rather, and think through some things that you likely would have never thought you'd be able to pull from a secular Bible study. Again, still learning the Bible while laughing at the bullshit, but now adding some nuance that can even give us some tools as secular communities, give us some lessons to learn from. There are a lot of things wrong in the Bible, and one thing that I have learned is that learning from other people's failure is an absolutely valid way to learn. And so we're going to find all of these fantastic failures that we can and pull something out of it, man. So again, I love you all tonight. Thank you for hanging out with me. If you're not a patron, we're starting at chapter 11 next week, the Soul Phoenix. Chapter 11. Oh yeah, if y'all have filled out the survey, let us know. 137 of you have filled out the survey and let us know if this was your first time. 65% of you, it was your first time here. Man, we had a lot of people here tonight who it was your first timers, which breaks my heart a little bit that we had technical difficulties. We got to get that together. Man. Oh, yes, Mel Gibson is doing a sequel. Yes, really interesting. Thank you, Bleak Composure. Thank you. Love y'all, man. Make sure you sign up on Patreon. If not, also sign up to our email list. That's absolutely free. Patreon is free, too. You don't have to sign up for one of the paid tiers. Also, you can join our Discord where conversations are going. Infidel has never been here before. This is his first time. We're going to need him to raise his hand and stand up and let everybody know where he visiting from today. Christianity calls me psychosis. Honestly, that happened to a lot of people. a lot of people. So Phoenix, try to read about a good 3 or 4 chapters, because I'm probably going to try to do 11 through 15 at the minimum. So that's good, man. All right, well, that's all I have for y'all tonight, man. I love y'all so much. Please do the best you can to stay productive, to stay progressive, and continue to live a life worth living. And until next time, man, keep rising. I'll holler at you later.